It would be absurd to say that most young people's attraction to poetry is far exceeded by their attraction to those few or many details of a poet's life that may be defined here loosely, operationally, as lurid. It's the sort of absurd notion, though, that I wouldn't mind taking out for a good academic run someday. I surely think at any rate that if I were to ask the 60-odd girls, or that is, the 60-odd girls, in my two writing for publication courses, most of them seniors, all of them English majors, to quote a line, any line from Ozymandias, or even just to tell me roughly what the poem is about, it is doubtful whether 10 of them could do either, but I'd bet my unrisen tulips that some 50 of them could tell me that Shelley was all for free love, and had one wife who wrote Frankenstein and another who drowned herself. Just for the sake of making a point, I could be embarrassing my students unnecessarily here. School teachers have done it before, or maybe I've just picked out the wrong poem. If it's true, as I've wickedly posed, that Ozymandias has left my students vividly unimpressed, perhaps a good deal of the blame for this can be laid to Ozymandias itself. Perhaps Mad Shelley wasn't quite mad enough. Assuredly, in any case, his madness wasn't a madness of the heart. My girls undoubtedly know that Robert Burns drank and romped to excess and are probably delighted about it. But I'm equally sure they also know all about the magnificent mouse his plow turned up. Is it just possible, I wonder, that those two vast and trunkless legs of stone standing in the desert are Percy's own? Is it conceivable that his life is outliving much of his best poetry? And if so, is it because, well, I'll desist. But young poets, beware. If you want us to remember your best poems at least as fondly as we do your racy, colorful lives, it might be as well to give us one good field mouse, flushed by the heart in every stanza. I'm neither shocked nor outraged at the idea, please mind. I don't think I'm even complaining, for if nobody's a fool, then neither am I, and I'm entitled to a non-fool's Sunday awareness that whoever we are, no matter how like a blast furnace the heat from the candles on our latest birthday cake, and however presumably lofty in intellectual, moral, and spiritual heights we've reached, our gusto for the lurid or the partly lurid, which of course includes both low and superior gossip, is probably the last of our fleshy appetites to be sated or effectively curbed. But my God, why do I rant on? Why am I not going straight to the poet for an illustration? One of Seymour's 184 poems, a shocker on the first impact only, on the second as heartening a paean to the living as I've read, is about a distinguished old ascetic on his deathbed surrounded by chanting priests and disciples, who lies straining to hear what the washerwoman in the courtyard is saying about his neighbor's laundry. The old gentleman, Seymour makes it clear, is faintly wishing the priests would keep their voices down a bit. I can see, though, that I'm having a little of the usual trouble entailed in trying to make a very convenient generalization stay still and docile long enough to support a wild specific premise. I don't relish being sensible about it, but I suppose I must. It seems to me indisputably true that a good many people the wide world over, of varying ages, cultures, natural endowments, respond with a special impetus, a zing even, in some cases to artists and poets who, as well as having a reputation for producing great or fine art, have something garishly wrong with them as persons. A spectacular flaw in character or citizenship, a construably romantic affliction or addiction, extreme self-centeredness, marital infidelity, stone deafness, stone blindness, a terrible thirst, a mortally bad cough, a soft spot for prostitutes, a partiality for grand-scale adultery or incest, a certified or uncertified weakness for opium or sodomy, and so on. God have mercy on the lonely bastards. If suicide isn't at the top of the list of compelling infirmities for creative men, the suicide poet or artist, one can't help noticing, has always been given a very considerable amount of avid attention, not seldom on sentimental grounds, almost exclusively, as if he were, to put it much more horribly than I really want to, the floppy-eared runt of the litter. It's a thought, anyway, finally said, that I've lost sleep over many times and possibly will again. How can I record what I've just recorded and still be happy, but I am unjolly, unmerry to the marrow, but my afflatus seems to be puncture-proof. Recollective of only one other person I've known in my life. You can't imagine what big hand-rubbing plans I had for this immediate space. They appear to have been designed, though, to look exquisite on the bottom of my wastebasket. I'd intended right here to relieve those last two midnight paragraphs with a couple of sunshiny witticisms. A matched pair of the sort of thigh slappers that so often I imagine turn my fellow raconteurs green with envy or nausea. It was my intention right here to tell the reader that when or if young people should stop by to see me about Seymour's life or death, a curious personal affliction of my own, alas, would make such an audience utterly unfeasible. I plan to mention just in passing, because this will be developed at, I hope, interminable length someday, that Seymour and I, as children, together spent close to 7 years answering questions on a network radio quiz program, and that ever since we formally went off the air, I've felt pretty much about people who as little as ask me the time of day almost precisely the way Betsy Trotwood felt about donkeys. Next, I intended to divulge that after some 12 years as a college instructor, I'm now, in 1959, subject to frequent attacks of what my faculty colleagues have been flattering enough to think of, I believe, as glasses disease. In lay language, a pathological spasm of the lumbar and lower ventral regions that causes an off-duty classroom lecturer to double up and hurriedly cross streets or crawl under large pieces of furniture when he sees anyone under 40 approaching. Neither of the two Sallys will work for me here, though. There's a certain amount of perverse truth to both, but not nearly enough for the terrible and undiscountable fact that has reached me between paragraphs, and I yearn to talk, to be queried, to be interrogated about this particular dead man. It's just got through to me that apart from many other, and I hope to God less ignoble, motives, I'm stuck with the usual survivor's conceit that he's the only soul alive who knew the deceased intimately. Oh, let them come. The callow and the enthusiastic, the academic, the curious, the long and the short and the all-knowing, let them arrive in busloads, let them parachute in, wearing Leicas. The mind swarms in gracious welcoming speeches. One hand already reaches for the box of detergent and the other for the dirty tea service. The bloodshot eye practices clearing. The old red carpet is out. A very delicate matter now, a trifle coarse to be sure, but delicate, very delicate. Considering that this matter may not come up in any desirable or massive detail later on, I think the reader should know right now, and preferably bear in mind to the very end, that all the children in our family were or are descended from an astonishingly long and motley double file of professional entertainers. For the most part, genetically speaking, or muttering, we sing, dance, and can you doubt it, tell funny jokes. But I think it peculiarly important to keep in mind, and so did Seymour even as a child, that there is also among us a wide miscellany of performing circus people and performing, so to say, circus fringe people. One of my great-grandfathers, and Seymour's, for an admittedly juicy example, was a quite famous Polish-Jewish carnival clown named Zozo, who had a penchant, up to the very end, one necessarily gathers, for diving from immense heights into small containers of water. Another of Seymour's and my great-grandfather's, an Irishman named McMahon, whom my mother, to her everlasting credit, has never been tempted to refer to as a darlin' man, was a self-employed type who used to set out a couple of octaves of empty whiskey bottles in a meadow and then, when a paying crowd had closed in, dance, we're told, rather musically on the sides of the bottles. So surely you'll take my word, we have, among other things, a few nuts on the family tree. Our parents themselves, Les and Bessie Glass, had a fairly conventional, but we believe remarkably good song and dance and patter act in vaudeville and music halls, reaching perhaps most nearly top billing in Australia, where Seymour and I spent about 2 years in total bookings of our very early childhood. But later, too, achieving much more than just passing notability on the old Pantages and Orpheum circuits here in America. In the opinion of not a few people, they might have gone on as a vaudeville team for quite a bit longer than they did. Bessie had ideas of her own, though. Not only has she always had something of an aptitude for reading handwriting on walls, two-a-day vaudeville already in 1925 was almost finished, and Bessie had, both as a mother and as a dancer, the very strongest convictions against doing 4-a-day shows for the big, new, ever-multiplying movie-cum-vaudeville palaces. But more important than that, ever since she was a child in Dublin and her twin sister succumbed, backstage of a galloping undernutrition, security, in any form, has had a fatal attraction for Bessie. At any rate, in the spring of 1925, at the end of a so-so run at the Albee in Brooklyn, with 5 children bedded down with German measles and 3.5 unstately rooms at the Hotel Alamac in Manhattan, and a notion that she was pregnant again, mistaken it turned out. The babies of the family, Zoe and Franny, were not born until 1930 and 1935, respectively. Bessie suddenly appealed to an honest-to-God influential admirer, and my father took a job in what he invariably referred to for years and years with no real fear of being contradicted around the house as the administrative end of commercial radio, and Gallagher and Glass's extended tour was officially over.